Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co-hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys,
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Software People Stories. This is a conversation I've really looked forward to with my colleague from PM Power, Vishu Hegde. Vishu, as he is known to many of us, has explored topics around business agility and the flow of work extensively and shares approaches and experiences of coaching large organizations through multi-year transformations. He delves into one of his favorite topics on points of discontinuity in our lives, middle life in particular, and work challenges, and how to take a leap of faith to get ourselves unstuck. And finally, what are 4 types of S-curves that organizations go through from startup to scale up? I invite you to listen to this insightful conversation.
So, good morning, Vishu, and
morning.
welcome back as a guest to the Software People Stories. I'm sure many people would have heard you speaking as a guest very early on, back in the time when this was called the Software Lifecycle Stories. We actually renamed it to Software People Stories because we understood that people were telling their stories about how they came into the software industry and so on. Wonderful to have you back as a guest, as a fellow PM Powerian. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation in terms of you sharing in depth a couple of things which I have noticed you speak a lot about and very passionately. And I hope our listeners will have something to take away from it. So, very warm welcome to you, Vishu.
Thanks, Chitra. Very happy to be back again.
I have seen you talking a lot about how to deliver value to customers and what is it that organizations should be focusing on. And one phrase that you use often or try to get people to think about, especially when you're engaging in dialogue with, talking to organizations about how to solve their business problems or how to add more meaning for customers, you talk a lot about flow. So could you share your thoughts on what is this flow about? You've mentioned something about flow metrics. What are they? And overall, what is it that organizations should be looking at when they look at flow?
Okay, this flow really comes from the lean thinking, which is really looking at end-to-end from a customer point of view. In fact, you can look at it as the flow in terms of 2 steps removed from what we are doing. For example, look at customer and look at supplier. Then we'll be able to see a much larger connect and an end-to-end flow. That will be a real value chain. Normally what happens is we tend to focus on very local, my part of the work. As an individual, as a team, or as a function or a business unit in the organization. But really from a customer perspective, work flows from a suppliers to customers, the whole value chain. The more we are able to see that, then we'll be able to even appreciate whatever small things we are doing in that whole value chain. We'll be able to do it in the context of adding value to that. This story of building temple versus laying bricks. I don't know whether you heard of that story.
Vaguely heard of it, but would be nice if you can narrate it.
It's a small story. Like there was a construction site, and two people were working, and a passerby came and asked, "What are you doing?" One of them said, "I'm laying bricks," and the other said, "I'm building a temple." In fact, both of them are doing the same work or similar work. This is a big difference. One person is not able to connect to the big picture, and obviously probably he feels I'm doing some drudgery work, whereas the other person is connected to the larger vision, and even though he's doing a small part of that, feels maybe more motivated, connects to the big vision, and then he understands the nuances of doing certain beyond the stated requirements, because the person can align to the vision much better. So I would say flow is similar to that. When we have the big picture of end-to-end value stream, we can really do the right things in the right context. Typically organizations, organizations are designed vertically to manage scale or manage people, manage the work into chunks. But real work flows horizontally from a customer point of view. So this flow is really to connect that dots more horizontally, build more collaboration. And flow metrics is a measure of that actually. In flow metrics, we tend to look at, one is from customer point of view, which is called say lead time. That means when is that customer wanted something, and when did the customer really got that? So that's kind of a lead time. The other one is called cycle time, which is kind of an internal view. That means how much time are we taking to accomplish something, which is part of our scope of work. For example, people say, I'm working on a story. I started working on a story, and then I have a done criteria, and I'll say I completed it. The moment it's taken up till it's done is cycle time. So it's kind of an internal view of how long are we taking. Lead time would be moment a story is created in a backlog. That means customer's need is captured. Till it is done and delivered to customer is a lead time. Then another useful metric in the flow metrics is called throughput. So throughput is more like what is the amount of flow at a given period. For example, weekly, how many stories are we delivering? It's something like how much water is flowing in a pipe. It's the quantity. So that's kind of a throughput. Then another useful metric is work in progress. Really, managing the work in progress really gives or improves the throughput. So it's like we'll be able to see where are the bottlenecks. So when you see this flow end to end, it may be flowing through multiple functions or multiple business units. We can see it's like a plumbing, if there are pipes connected with different sizes, the throughput will be as big as the smallest pipe. So when we connect this and see the full picture, we'll be able to see where are these bottlenecks. So work in progress is a very useful thing to look at that, and then minimizing that work in flow actually improves the throughput delivered to customer. So these are some of the useful metrics in a flow context.
Very elegantly put, Vishu. Thank you. In fact, one thing that I've often struggled with is how do you get people to see flow in the manner that you just described? Because people, like you said, are so used to working vertically, and more often than not, perhaps without intending to do so, land up thinking that, hey, my part of the work is complete and now I am handing it over to somebody else. And if there are any bottlenecks, either I really don't know what to do about it, or I may not even be seeing it that way. So how can we as coaches or people who bring about this awareness in the organizations that we work with, how is it that we can get them to rally around or come together to see things in a flow?
I think very, very challenging part because it's easier said than done, especially if the organization is larger and existing for many years, certain culture and way of working, the structures would have got settled in. So that change is a bigger challenge. If I look at to really achieve this flow, there are multiple dimensions. I would always start with the mindset, because if I look at agility, for example, it really starts in the mind, then it manifests outside. Similar thing in everything, actually. It has to manifest in the mind first, then can come out. That means it has to be in the thought processes, the culture aspects. So I'll come to that in a while. Then the another very big part which improves or impedes the flow is actually structure. For example, we have still a very large industrial era influence in terms of how we design organizations. Typically, organizations are, as I said, the vertically designed. They inhibit a lot of this flow because they create boundaries and walls, and then people are aligned by vertical goals rather than the horizontal end-to-end flow-based goals. That's a big impediment. This also comes to in terms of HR systems, what people are rewarded on. Normally, if they are rewarded on individual performance or their own team performance, team is slightly better than so individual. But even then, when you look at the flow, it will be multiple teams coming together. You'll have to do that. So there are multiple things in an organization context that needs to be touched upon. Of course, then there are processes and tools which also can make or break. For example, if the processes are more aligned for the flow, then it enables that. Similarly, tools, if different parts of this organization use different tools, then it again breaks. So we need to touch multiple pieces. But if I have to look at how to enable this has to be leadership led, because teams at the bottom cannot do it by themselves. I would say it has to start with then this vision that we need to have this flow from a customer point of view. Then it should translate into kind of strategies. That means if I have to change from my current state to moving into this state, it's a kind of a change requiring multiple years maybe. So that means strategy should be steady enough to bring about this change, because it's not an overnight effort. Then the structural changes will be required. We see now many large enterprises moving from IT agility to business agility, where they are very tightly bringing the business and IT combined, especially like in like Spotify model. One of the key highlights in that, I would say, is actually breaking down this hierarchical organization into more network organization. Various tribes collaborating to look from an end customer value, rather than information flowing vertically up and then coming down to another part of the organization. Now it's more network. It actually, people are more autonomous and they reach out and collaborate and connect, so that these vertical movements are reduced and more decisions happen through these network schemes. I think that's a very good move in terms of, because that's one of the very big barriers, the structures. Then bringing cross-functional teams, because then the teams will be more aligned for a common goal from a customer value, rather than I maximize my local department's performance. So it's more like a systems thinking. So instead of local optimization, I really look from my system maximization. Of course, then rest of the things will flow. So how do we then process, for example, from some sales and marketing to, say, a product development to a deployment? Again, depending on type of the organization, if there are manufacturing or if it's a financial services, whatever may be that. Then processes needs to be stitched, where people have to see this, what we call as the common elephant. So we do certain exercises called seeing the full elephant. What happens is different functions look at part of the problem. And just like that, the blind men and elephant story, right?
Yes.
People touch different parts of the elephant and describe somebody says leg, touches leg and says a pillar, and somebody touches trunk and says a snake or whatever. Very similar phenomena happens in large organization because it's very difficult for everybody to see the full picture of the customer's need or a problem. So the seeing the full elephant exercise actually brings such cross-functional leaders together and helps them to see the full picture. So it's kind of an, it takes a day of workshop to for them to kind of go through that and really see that mutually. That's really powerful because we have seen that builds a lot of empathy, because now people can realize, oh, now I understand why the other department behaves like this or expects like this. That actually builds the mindset, what I talked about, the flow mindset. Now I see the whole thing. That is another thing which we found very useful. This is very useful tool for coaches to bring those people together, and that teaches the mindset, that teaches the process, and then people take up action items which are holistic rather than just local optimization. In fact, without that, we have seen people tend to do local optimization, which creates actually system dysfunction. This is one of the systems thinking paradigms actually. It's like if you see in Bangalore traffic, people tend to maximize, as long as I can go through this, I'm fine. So they will come on the right side of the road, block the, create deadlocks. So that's really a local optimization and leading to system dysfunction. Similar thing could happen many times unknowingly, because people don't know that I'm trying to maximize my department's goal, but it's actually hindering the end-to-end flow. So these are some of the things I have come across, which I found very useful in building a flow.
I really like the way you alluded to Bangalore city traffic example. A lot of our listeners will definitely resonate with that, at least the ones who are listening in Bangalore and perhaps many other large cities in the world. In fact, you referred to the first thing as developing the right mindset. What is it that you have seen work for you when you work with individuals as well as teams, causing that, beginning to cause a small shift in their mindset to, let's say, perhaps enable a better flow of work within themselves and for the organization?
Actually, this topic is very favorite for me. Always I think of everything as mindset first, then how can we manifest it in outside. We call it managing outside by mastering inside. The more we are able to deal within, we can actually do outside much better. So I see this as a kind of a sandwich approach in an organization context, top down and bottom up. The mindset change and the culture change aspects. If I say bottom up, it's at the team level. How do I bring mindset change in individuals? If I look at this kind of a flow or a lean or agility kind of a culture, what is needed in individuals is a lot more of the emotional intelligence part. Normally, if I look at in an IT or a software organization, we get a lot of high IQ people who are brilliant and technologically very, very strong. But what happens is they will be very individualistic. They will have challenges in terms of collaborating, accepting some other's idea, and helping somebody, and collaborating rather than competing. So when you look at this flow or agility, what is required is a lot more of the diverse set of ideas and people coming together and working together. In fact, if you have to create innovation for customers, what is needed is a lot more diversity. If there is a lot of homogeneity in the team, we can't expect any great innovation. If there has to be diversity, then they need emotional intelligence. Otherwise, there will be conflicts. They will fight. I would see creating the need for and awareness of emotional intelligence is a very big thing in the team. Again, this is because our education system is highly IQ oriented. In fact, we almost filter out EQ people. And when you get high caliber people into the organizations, typically they are very individual contributors. But as an agile team, we expect them to be a teamwork, high collaboration, communication. So we need to develop the emotional intelligence parts in them. This is the one bottom-up part. Now, more important part in organization culture and mindset is top-down, because that is actually leadership-led. And there is certain amount of role modeling happens in the organization where knowingly or unknowingly people look up to the leaders and they emulate similar behaviors. So we always actually start with this from the leadership team. So we call it as effective agile leadership. So we have kind of a agile leadership canvas which has multiple dimensions to train and coach the leadership teams. Again, this is a difficult in the transformation journey, because normally when the organizations engage us as coaches, they tend to think that we are all fine, go and fix the team and make them agile. We say that no, 50% is agile transformation. It is at a leadership team level, but the major 50% is at leadership level. That's very subtle. Whereas at a team level, it's a little bit more concrete in terms of practices. If you look at all the Scrum and ceremonies and artifacts and metrics, they're a lot more visible and easy to grasp and easy to train people. And whereas this mindset and culture part are subtle, which is not so much visible. That's why it becomes a challenge. It's like, the iceberg. Normally we take that metaphor. 10% of the iceberg is visible, but 90% is submerged in the water, not so visible. But what really moves the iceberg is not the visible wind, but the not so visible undercurrents. Very similar way, it's these mindset and cultures and behaviors, which are very subtle, but they are the real make or break for agility or the flow. So from top down, we conduct leadership workshops covering this leadership canvas and then coach them. Again, this coaching leadership team is a lot more challenging than coaching teams, because leaders don't want to be coached. They think they know all and they have been successful, and that's why they are there. In fact, one of the phrases I have heard is that high performers need more coaching. There's a misconception that people think that coaching is needed for who is not performing. But it's the other way actually. High performers need more coaching, because otherwise they will hit the dead end faster. Actually, this is another topic maybe, which we call as S-curves. That means they stagnate very quickly because they are running very fast.
And that's a very good segue into our next part of the conversation, which is S-curves anyway. In fact, I just wanted to add that perhaps this stagnation, as well as the popular perception perhaps that leadership, high performers, not leadership, but high performers really don't need coaching, perhaps is also an outcome of the focus on our educational system on IQ versus EQ, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, in the VUCA world, which is, we say, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, that means highly dynamic world. Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Brought You Here Won't Take You There. It is so true. So leaders who have been successful today may not be able to perform tomorrow because things are very dynamic. We tend to repeat what brought us here. So that means they need to be a lot more open and receptive and learnable, adaptable to new things, and look for and seek inputs rather than I know it, I don't need any other input kind of a attitude. So one of the things we do in workshops is to break that first actually. And there are interesting games actually, which actually reflects and opens them up. So saying that, yes, I think, I should be more open. Then other things become little easy to say, provide the inputs. So you're talking about the S-curves.
Yes.
What I have seen is this is not a one-time journey. It is kind of a sequence of, or you can say, cycles. Personally, I have gone through my own S-curves in my career. It's almost like I start with something. I'm a learner, novice, and then I become very good at that. It's like the rising of the S curve. And over a period, I start doing more of the same, and then I start stagnating. And I have seen if I continue to do more of the same, then I start drooping down in my performance, in my interest, in my ability to learn new things in that. That's a dangerous zone actually. So before I stagnate, actually I should start my next S curve. The more I stay on my previous S curve for longer time, harder it is to pull me up from that for the next S curve because it droops down much more. So I have gone through this. So shifting that S curve is a very scary thing. It's like in a circus, I have to leave this swing and catch the other swing. So it's almost like this. I have been very good at something. I have to stop that almost and pick up something new, which I am very novice now. It looks like I am actually coming down, but I have seen that is the one which takes me to the next orbit. So I call this as transitioning the S curves. So transitioning these S curves are actually points of discontinuity. I have seen people need a lot of coaching there because it's the times of uncertainty, ambiguity, and kind of fear or insecurity. I have taken coaching from others actually in such junctions, and I see this kind of magnified, or it strikes when as we are doing coaching to large number of managers. So people typically at the middle level, I have seen that I call this as challenges of the middle, say around the 35 to 45 years of kind of range in our industry. They are struggling even in their life at the middle zone. That means they have kind of aging parents, young children, juggling with all those things. And also they will be going through biological changes, the hormonal changes, the slowing down. So in our coaching, even though we start more on the professional side, invariably it shifts to the personal side because we can't separate those two. And I have seen people need maximum help there, and people tend to not talk about that because they feel it's kind of it's private to them, or they feel not comfortable to share. They think that it's only unique to them. But when I sense that, I actually share my own journeys, and I talk about that. I have seen this with so many managers. I then notice that almost their 50% burden reduces because they think it's only they are struggling actually. And this challenge of the middle, another point I have seen this challenge of the middle is in the organization, they are also in the middle. There are senior bosses above them, the teams below them, and the middle management is really stressed with the matrix organizations most of the time. That means they have to work with many other people across different kind of functions or departments who don't report to them, but they have to get the work done. So there will be shared accountability, shared responsibility, which is always kind of a conflicting zone. So I see people struggling in this zone of middle. A lot of times they'll stagnate there because they're not guided properly. So when we talk about this transitioning the S curve, I have seen people get kind of liberated, and they will actually make a jump to some other role, some other new work. I feel very gratified. It's very gratifying for me to look at people make that transitions.
Really interesting, Vishu. Personally, I think I have experienced as well as seen others go through a lot of these feelings of being stuck. And somehow I also see it manifesting even at an organization level, especially having worked in product companies. You either ride on the success of how you have developed products so far and the success of the product itself. But like you said, what gets you here can't take you further. And very often, either product companies are late catching up with competition, it's some sort of a reverse function where customers are not ready to shift as quickly. But in a world where technology is changing so rapidly, newer,
Yeah,
smaller companies are creating different products, perhaps things that are easily scalable, very easily deployable, and so on. And the older
correct.
companies are suddenly finding themselves playing catch up, and that begin
Mm,
to impact their margins, their way of doing business, because the whole model of business is shifting. Suddenly they are stuck. So,
mm,
do you have any things that you can share that companies can also do differently?
absolutely. In fact, just like I see this as individuals going through the S curves, I see even organizations go through the S curves. And if they don't go through, actually they will not exist. They have to sail through the S curves. In large enterprises, this pattern is little harder to see. It exists in multiple S curves actually. But whereas we see this very clearly in, say, startups. So we do like startup to scale up consulting for many organizations. Typically, startups start with some brilliant idea. Founder or co-founders have a great, technical idea, and they implement it, and they see some, product or value to customer initially, and soon they will be challenged to scale it up, either in terms of the product features or larger markets or different kinds of customer segments. Then suddenly it's a different problem. So it's a new S curve actually. And many times we see this. The first S curve in startups is very individual centric. Some brilliant people will actually, heroes will create. Moment the next S curve comes, it's a different characteristics about to deal with scale, deal with, the size and reach. We needed different kinds of people, operationally challenging. So many times the people who are very successful in first S curve will not be able to do it in the second S curve. So if the founders and co-founders are not aware of this, they will tend to do more of the same what they did in the first S curve, and actually they will stagnate and start drooping down. Actually, the second S curve, we call it as more of a competency centric. That means it's not good enough to have one or two individual brilliant people. You need to multiply them. We need to use good people to create more good people. So it's more of a people development and competency development kind of a focus. Then we see it's not good enough to be just people based only, because the next S curve is even more larger scale, which needs to be then more system based. People will come and go, people will move around, but things should go on. That really happens if you have built up kind of a systems in the organization. So third S curve, we see it more like a system centric. That requires again a different kinds of people. The fourth S curve we see is more of a fractal. That means now I have become big enough, I can actually multiply myself into subunits which can operate autonomously. Otherwise, I tend to remain monolithic and try to deal with the scale. It won't scale enough. So fractals is another big challenge, because now I have to let go, and the subunits allow them to operate with their own independence and driving the whole thing. So we see something like this as a startup to scale up, the S curves moving up.
Very, very interesting and very beautifully put, Vishu. In fact, I certainly see a book in the making, and I hope you have uncovered an author within you. This has been an amazing conversation. In fact, I have noted several further topics of conversation, which I'm sure a lot of our audience would love to hear. And having a PM Powerian share it, I think will be very, very interesting and something that people can look forward to. Thank you so much for your time today. Are there any last messages that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. In fact, these two topics were very interesting. I didn't know how you picked up these two, flow and S-curves, because they are very related as well. Ultimately, even this S-curve is to actually enhance the flow. If people are getting stuck, organizations are getting stuck, actually it's hindering the flow and value delivery to customers. So very interesting. I like the conversations, and I like bringing these two topics together as you brought it up. And thanks for the opportunity for this conversation.
Thank you, Vishu. The pleasure's all mine, and certainly looking forward to more conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate the show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.